How are you?
Oh, hi.
Mike Dolan was the.
I would like to welcome all of you to our event this evening, Fracking and the impact of Utica on Ohio. We have a good panel, and I want to let you know that we have some more events coming up in the next couple of weeks. We have a forum on transportation. We have a forum on the election for mayor of the city of Cleveland in August. And we have a lot of work coming up in September and October, right around the election. Come to the League of Women Voters Greater Cleveland website, or our Facebook page, or get on our list. Put your name down, and we'll send you information about upcoming events. This forum is co-sponsored by Case Western Reserve University Siegel Lifelong Learning, the League of Women Voters of Greater Cleveland, Crain's Cleveland Business, and Cleveland.com. Our corporate sponsor is First Interstate Properties Limited. I'd like to introduce our moderator for this evening. Dan Shingler is a native of Akron, where he attended the University of Akron before beginning his journalism career. He currently covers shale gas and energy, steel, automotive, manufacturing, and general assignments for Crain's Cleveland Business. Dan has also served as the paper's banking and finance reporter. Dan?
That's all pretty much true.
Did you just write that?
I wrote that at some point. No, he got Akron in there. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Welcome and join our panelists. We have with us Mike Chadsey from the Ohio Oil and Gas Association, Trent Dougherty from the Ohio Environmental Council, and Ned Hill from Ohio State University and previously with Cleveland State University. So we're going to discuss shale gas and kind of the state of shale drilling in Ohio. And I think we'll kind of start maybe with that, mostly probably from Mike, but everybody will jump in. And I guess I have tended to be involved with shale from writing about it as a business reporter. And the question I probably get asked more than anything else about shale now is, whatever happened to that shale thing? Because there's a perception, I think, that it came on strong and then it went away. But I usually tell them something different. But what's going on out there, Mike? Do we still have shale gas?
I can guarantee you, without a doubt, and I'm sure we're going to agree on this, the shale rock is still there. Hasn't left. No, I tell you
Should
what.
I put Ned between the environmentalists?
Give us 10 minutes, and then we'll let you know. I tell you what. The last couple of years, and mostly because of pricing,
Sure.
certainly because of infrastructure or the lack thereof, things have certainly slowed down. But I will tell you that 2017 is looking more active
Sure.
and brighter than the last 2 years.
I tend to think that the industry, I don't mean necessarily in Ohio, but as a whole across the nation, it kind of drilled itself into a slump. I mean,
there's an old bumper sticker from the 80s that basically the last go-round that we went through that a lot of the industry guys have, it said, "Dear Lord, give me one more boom. I promise not to screw this one up." And those bumper stickers are out and about again. And basically it's the exact same thing you just mentioned, is that the wells are so prolific, so much gas, price depresses, folks slow down. But every time that this happens, companies get a little leaner, a little more efficient. And I think the technology helps out with that a little bit, but certainly companies making fiscal decisions to slow down. OPEC is certainly part of that equation. Even just recently, they agreed to extend their slowdown for another 6 or 8 months.
and is it still slow in eastern Ohio, or is it starting to pick back up, or what are you seeing?
Probably the best comparison is that at our peak in October, November of 14, we had 59 horizontal drilling rigs running.
Okay.
Right now, I think we're at 22. In comparison, I think Pennsylvania's at 33 and West Virginia's at 11, I think.
Okay.
And so we'll probably never get to that 59 again, that
Okay.
60 number, for those exact reasons. They're a little more efficient. Laterals are a little longer, more frac stages per lateral. But we hope to continue to see more activity.
And when you say a lateral, that's the drill bit and the hole of the well is going down, and then it's going out parallel to the ground, laterally, right?
Correct. I mean, for the last, last couple cycles of industry activity that was really hot and heavy, it was mostly vertical drilling with little directional drilling, meaning this. Now we're doing this with this. And the idea there is that you can have a 5-acre pad with 6, 8, 10 wells that kind of go out like bike spokes. Versus just producing that one area in that 4-acre pad that is sort of in and around that.
So I could go down one hole and then go
Yep.
out this direction,
Yep.
go out that direction.
Yep. And we're seeing laterals. I think Eclipse now has the number 1 and number 2 longest laterals, certainly in Ohio, but arguably maybe even the country, at about 19,000 feet.
Okay.
And their Purple Haze well in Noble County.
So that's almost 4 miles.
Yes.
4 miles that this
Out vertical.
tunnel is going underground in the shale.
Yes.
Underneath farms and roads and
Absolutely. Yeah.
maybe even whole town. And how deep is that?
So we're probably in the action of the play, your Guernsey, Noble, Monroe, Harrison County area. You're about a mile down, and depending on the operator, 3-4 miles out. And the formation down there is several hundred feet thick.
Okay.
And that's the target formation, that Point Pleasant and the Utica you're trying to stay in.
Okay. And you mentioned that we at one point had 59, almost 60 drilling rigs actively drilling wells in Ohio. And now how many do we have?
22.
22. But that number is more than we had 6 months ago?
Yeah, I mean, we got down to pretty close single digits the last 2 years.
Okay.
But Dan, if you
Yeah.
pay attention to Mike's math, it's really kind of interesting, because each of those rigs is 25% more efficient than the rig
Absolutely.
was last year.
Absolutely.
So if you take that 22, that probably is the work that 22 is doing is the work that 29 to 30 could have been doing.
Okay. Meaning it's producing 25% more gas, or what?
Lateral feet.
It's
lateral
okay. It's
feet.
drilling 25% more pipe into the ground.
And the wells, because we're understanding the geology better than we did 3, 4, 5 years ago in the Utica anyway, we're learning more. And I think that will always show in the fact that these wells are producing more. Like
Okay.
the volume of gas being produced is just more than it was a couple of years ago.
Oh, it's absolutely.
So we're producing more gas now than we were a couple years ago. Are we producing more gas than ever?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, gas.
I think
Yeah,
we're at
gas.
gas.
Okay.
At one point, Ohio was the crude oil capital of the world during the Rockefeller days. And now, if you combine Ohio, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, or the Appalachian Basin, we're the 3rd largest natural gas producer in the world. Number 1 is the U.S.
Now, you know, Trent, of course, is picturing photographs from the Rockefeller days.
I know he is.
And they weren't. But anyway.
A little
all right,
different
yeah,
back
all
then.
right.
But the number 1 is the U.S., number 2 is Russia, number 3 is sort of the Appalachian Basin as
Okay.
far as largest gas producer.
Now, when this hit, 2012-ish, whenever the was going to be the biggest thing since the plow in Ohio, is a quote I don't think we'll ever forget, or your industry will ever not have to live up to. But
Thank you, Aubrey.
it was going on up here. I had people in Geauga County telling me they were going to get rich. Canton was quickly calling itself
All the way
the
up to
Utica
Trumbull
capital.
County.
Yeah, all the way up into Trumbull County, and drillers, I think, told people who were listing at the time, we got to drill holes before we find out where the next hole is going to be, and then ultimately where the so-called sweet spot is. Where is this activity now in Ohio?
So, to your point, every time that we poke a hole in the ground, that's a data point. Where's the formation? How thick? What's in the formation? And so now that we've been at this, Chesapeake kind of started 2010, 2011, really started ramping up 2013, then the bottom fell out. That play that was originally maybe 22 counties is now down to maybe 7.
Okay.
So that would be Carroll, Guernsey, Belmont, Harrison, Monroe, Noble, Belmont, kind of that area right down. So
Okay.
south of 30, east of 77 of the Pennsylvania border.
Okay, so a little more southeast than was maybe first
Absolutely.
envisioned.
Everybody thought the Chesapeake and Rex, Hillcorp all thought it was to the north. Even BP thought it was to the north. It turns out it's much more to the south. The trend of the play is still to the south.
And are people correct in thinking that that's where it's feasible to drill today at $1.25 per MCF or whatever Ohio drillers are getting for their gas? If that were $4 or $5, that area would expand?
A little bit, maybe to the north, you get a little more Columbiana County, but everything is all dependent on not only the natural gas price, but also the crude oil price. So we know how far south and how far east we go. Natural gas prices maybe dictate how far north we go. Crude oil prices dictate how far west we go. Do we cross over 77
Okay.
into that condensate crude oil window?
Okay.
So what most people who don't follow this closely get confused with is they just assume it's all just natural gas. Because of the value of the Utica Formation, some of the Point Pleasant Formation, is that it still is fairly rich in natural gas liquids. So dry gas, methane, that's the stuff we've produced historically here in Ohio,
That's what you burn in your furnace.
and we put in our furnace. And the cows also give us a disproportionate share, but we can't do anything with that.
Well, we could.
We can.
Yeah, actually we can. I've seen a biodigester. But what drives the play itself is the value of the natural gas liquids, which is everything with an "ain" at the end of it. And that is the building blocks of the plastics industry. And it's that richness that makes a difference. And the big surprise, I think when we did the
This is the ethane that if
Yeah,
it's with the
ethane,
gas,
butane, propane.
we call that wet gas. If it has ethane in it,
Right. So-
it goes to something called a cracker, which is a multi-billion-dollar facility like the
It's
one
a-
they're building in Pennsylvania.
Right, it's a huge tea kettle or ice box, but it makes the building blocks for polyethylene, polyurethane, and all of the commercial plastics that the injection molding industry depends on.
Okay,
And we don't have one in Ohio right now.
a cracker.
They're moving on the one in the PA, Shell over Monaca, PA. We're anxiously waiting the decision from PTT Global Chemical about their site down in Belmont County.
Now the Shell one is huge. They're all big, but the
Yeah,
Shell one is
that's the big one. That's
many
the big
times
dog, yeah.
larger than the other
Shell
ones.
was, I think, an $8 billion investment.
Somewhere between 6 and 8.
It's
by the
almost
time
like a
you look at it.
government project every time you look at it.
It'll take
The
4 or
number
5 years
is
to build.
bigger.
But right now, they all exist on the Gulf Coast.
Right.
So to be able to process that product here, and even as big
So our
as
ethane gets shipped 1,200 miles
Yeah.
for someone else to turn it into polyethylene
to make a plastic,
to make a
this-
plastic.
this table,
Sometimes then sending the polyethylene back here
right back here.
to a plastic company that is making the resin or the things.
And Trent, do you want to say something? We've been
I'm-
talking
I
right
love
over
this
you.
back-
He-
Yeah,
Trent-
this is fine.
Trent's-
I've got my-
Trent-
I've got my own.
Trent's
I'm just
waiting
waiting.
for his part of the battle, I think.
Yeah.
So there are two parts to the promise, the play, and the reality. Oh, no, not two parts. I just made up three.
It's even better than we thought.
Yeah. So the promise came in, and as much as the work that we did at Cleveland State with the exploratory work, and we tried to hold back expectations, it was very hard to do, mostly because no one knew where the geography was, and the geology had to be worked out. The second problem that was going on at the same time is that most people take the descriptor fracking and believe it is just this process here, which is drilling down a mile, drilling laterals out from 2 to 4 miles, taking an incredible amount of water, putting sand in it and other chemicals, and at great pressure fracturing rock. It's really a dramatic sounding thing. But most people don't know that almost every single well, including the vertical ones, are fracked. And the problems that took place in Cuyahoga County and in just, I think, a little bit south of Cuyahoga County didn't come from the large horizontal wells. What they were vertical wells with old property rights that were in people's backyards. That was pretty
You're
nasty.
talking about decades ago in some
Yeah.
places, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it was.
Well, no,
You're talking about
the drilling took place over the past 3 years.
no, the one in which the house blew off its.
Oh, I didn't even know we had one of those.
Was that in
Well,
Chagrin
that was in
Falls or Geauga
Bainbridge
County?
Township.
Bainbridge Township. Yeah, okay.
I'm thinking much more of the stuff that was taking place south of 270, where 270, 271 down in that area, around Broadview.
Okay.
There was
Often those weren't even shale wells, right? They were sandstone wells.
there were sandstone
and-
wells.
primarily.
Yeah, and so what happened was these things got conflated.
Uh-huh.
And so a lot of the regulatory issues and the property right issues that came up over the sandstone wells, and that people then conflated that with what was taking place in the Utica.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's certainly what where we're coming from is this is, even though it's, you use the term fracking, and fracking means what you just said it was, and it can happen whether it's vertical, whether it's horizontal, but these are much different operations than we're talking about when we're talking about the vertical wells that happened and that we, in 2004 coined urban drilling in Ohio, where we had special regulations put in place for urban drilling, which happened mainly in this neck of the woods. These
Or
are
this neck of the suburbs.
exactly.
It's often, I often hear it described as a large-scale industrial process.
And
Shale development, yeah.
Definitely, and it is that size and that efficiency. One of the things that we were concerned about, come June, actually a little bit more, probably March of 2011, when the state was just getting ready for what they expected, was the idea of 2,500 or so well permits being put in place in about a year and a half time. And as Mike said, that's changed a little bit. We have fewer, but they're even bigger than the operations that we had.
And there was also great
been
concern
thinking.
over whether state regulators and inspectors would be able to gear up in time to keep up with that level of activity so quickly.
Absolutely, and it was from our point of view in March, and I think March of 2011 is when we were really advocating for the state, knowing that probably I think in about the June of 2011 time is when a lot of the bulk of the permits were starting to get out there, is to have what I called the hindsight moment. So we have Pennsylvania and we have Texas and we have some of the western states that have done this before, earlier than we have, a year or two earlier, and they went through a lot of headaches and a lot of speed bumps and a lot of problems.
And a lot of bad regulation.
Yeah, and it was our hope and our push for Department of Natural Resources to take that moment to look at what was happening in Pennsylvania, what was going wrong over there, what was going wrong in Texas and in North Dakota, and have that moment that I think we believe we are having now on the coal side of the issue, where if we knew 100 years ago that we were going to have streams run orange in southeast Ohio because of acid mine drainage from coal, we would have done something better to begin with. If we would have known, you know this also from earlier today, if we knew about the problems we were going to have with nuclear power, and that it wasn't going to be so cheap that it's unmeterable and we may have to pay utilities money to keep these nuclear plants
No
up.
inside jokes. Ned was testifying before the legislature.
Sorry,
on
we would
nuclear
have
power today.
done something in those days.
I did put on a suit, but it wasn't for you guys.
And-
I would have been more casual.
Yeah, and so the idea that we're in that hindsight moment where we could go ahead and get the regulations put in place didn't happen as quickly as we would have wanted to have it before that operation is gone. But I will give Department of Natural Resources their due, is that when there have been problems in Ohio, they have jumped on those problems.
So are you also saying that from your perspective, an environmental watchdog perspective, that the lull was a good thing, the lull in the drilling, the kind of slump that we had?
I believe it is, yeah.
Okay.
And I'll jump on
Yeah.
from the economic perspective.
Yeah.
I also think it was a good thing.
Sure.
But let Trent go first.
Yeah, I think that it gave, again, probably a second hindsight moment for the industry and the regulators to to look at it from the iterative process that we felt that it needed to go through. And if you know, going down to single digits or even 22 rigs instead of 59 at a time, and already permitting the 250 coming after that, you have the ability to see what the technology is going to provide a year or two down the road and have those permits and those permit conditions in place so that you protect against some of the bad things that have come up, which we can talk about in a minute. But.
And then the other thing that was going on was when we had our initial wells, and including some of our really successful wells in the first year or two, they were bringing up all this gas with little to no way to get it taken away, which meant they were selling it for, I mean, it was just dirt cheap, under $1 an MCF in many cases that I saw. So was the law good for industry?
It was, not only on the regulatory side and the economic side, but for the industry to build out our infrastructure. Processing, the Mark West facilities, the other pipelines, the various other things, the pressure stage, all the other things that needed to be put into place to actually get the gas to market after it's being processed. We didn't have in Ohio. Those were literally built to handle all the gas that was being processed in the entire Appalachian Basin. So yeah, that was also happening. So there were some good things too.
Now, my impression is some people at the table would like the slump to last longer than some other people at the table. But and where are we on building pipelines to get this stuff taken out of there? And
Before you go to take it out, let's take another
who's messing with Trent?
a little pause. You aren't in charge. One of the things, because of the nature of the leases, there was incentive to put
The mineral rights,
the mineral
oil
rights
leases, right? Yeah.
Right. There was an incentive to put holes in the ground pretty quickly.
Okay.
So-
Because if you don't drill, you have to give up your
You
lease.
give up your lease, and you'll have to go back and re-sign and
Right.
pay again. So you had a lot of pads being built with one well, and they move on out. And what happened, and the reason why the pause was good, was a lot of those wells, not only were we not hooked up to the national markets, these wells weren't hooked up to gathering lines. So we had the ability, or the companies did, to put in the small gathering pipelines, and that's a much more responsible way to develop the fields. Whenever I look at what happened in the Dakotas, I get a little upset because the wells were drilled out in the Bakken, and they didn't have time to put in pipeline systems to gather the resource and put them into a large pipeline and bring them east or west. And the other thing, because they also didn't have infrastructure out there, most of those wells were powered by diesel engines. So they were only after the oil. So if you looked out at Dakota, what happened is they were flaring the methane, which environmentally is a horrible thing to do. They were using diesel to power all the pumps, and then they were trucking the liquids to tank car lines. And in fact, we see them here in Cleveland all the time. Have you guys ever, if you're up at 130th and Brook Park, 130th, out by the airport and go all the way along, frequently you'll see a train of solid black tank cars that goes on for about 2.5 miles. That was the Bakken.
Well, there was a time, I don't think this condition still exists, but there was a time when you could look at a satellite photo of the Dakotas at night when it should basically just be a pool of black ink, and it looked like you were looking at Chicago from all of the gas that was being flared off, right?
So in Ohio, because of the existing pipeline structure, building the pipeline structure, and the pause because of the collapse of prices, that means that we're in a lot better shape. Now, for the environmental perspective, reusing frack water is the holy grail, but we still have frack water issues.
What do you mean?
Well, when you frack a well, some of the water stays behind, but a lot of it comes back up.
Okay.
And it comes up, and it's got the mud and the fluid and frack waste in it. And in fact, a number of wastewater treatment plants in the Ohio Valley finally broke even by processing frack water, cleaning it up. which is the right way to do it.
Well, and I think, I mean, when you frack a well, you drill it, you pump this water in, you not only get your water back, you get some extra water back because there's brine and stuff like that down there, right? And that's what has to, or what is disposed of in the injection wells.
Class 2 wells.
And that's also, I believe, the leading suspect for possibly inducing seismic activity as well.
We had the Youngstown fraud earthquakes.
The Youngstown what?
Fraud earthquakes.
Fraud
The
earthquakes?
earthquakes were real.
The earthquakes are real.
The
but-
guy doing him was the fraud.
Right.
And he's in jail. Yeah.
Well, when you've got federal charges, state charges, criminal charges, and civil charges. Message sent, hopefully. So.
Well, if we assume that being close to a conviction is a sign that he may have screwed up.
But that aside, I mean, I think everyone has kind of agreed that we've got to be careful with injection wells. We don't want to put them near existing faults. We want to make sure we watch closely how they're used,
Volumes,
monitor
pressures.
volumes and pressures.
And you don't have the same operator when he's tired of doing deep injection, just dumping it in a
Just
creek.
dumps it straight into
Sure,
the Mahoning River.
sure.
Yeah, the Mahoning River.
And, you know, with the waste issue, we have the same, it seems to be the same issue that we have on construction demolition debris in Ohio. We are the low rent, high risk dumping ground for a lot of what's happening east of us.
Well, in Pennsylvania, they cannot inject this.
They
can
do not.
They do not.
They can, but they only have about 9 wells, maybe 8 or 9.
Well, I should have rephrased that. I don't mean they legally can't. I mean a driller doesn't have an option
Not
to
many.
inject it into
Not
a,
many.
into-
Not
Does he
maybe
have some?
5,
Okay.
8, 9, something like that. And there was a couple of reasons. You know, before that, they tried to process this through municipal systems and discharge in the river.
They were not ready.
And that was not effective, efficient, environmentally sound.
Right.
Actually, the technical term, it was yucky.
Okay, yeah.
It
technical
was
term, yes,
yucky.
Okay, yucky, okay.
And so now they were sending the stuff here into West Virginia. Now they're starting to drill some of their own. And I think it's somewhere between 5 and 9, some single-digit number of Class 2s in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
The geology's a little different there, but primarily they didn't have a way to do it because they were trying to process it municipally.
And one of the issues with injection wells, I think, is a big problem is the fact that so much different than production wells. Production wells, you make money for everybody around you. The injection wells make money for the people that own those injection wells. And a lot of those...
If I'm the adjacent landowner, I don't get any royalties
get
from the fact that
possible-
some of your water might be creeping into underneath my.
Exactly, and a lot of those, you have, where the oil and gas fracking operations, the shale gas operations are. We talked about that sort of south of here. You've got areas like, I believe, the far northeast corner, your Ashtabulias, your Trumbull counties. Sure. That's where the densest population of these injection wells are located, mainly because I believe some of them were the old vertical wells that were refurbished. So that's the reason why. But it's there. It's far away from where the production is. It's far away from where people are making the money around the entire community, and that brings not only, I think, the economic turmoil. Why am I not getting a piece of the risk,
Right.
the risk factor, as well as, yes, you had the earthquakes there in Youngstown, 2011, 2012. You can look to Oklahoma. Their seismic activity's gone up 600 times what it was historically over the past few years. And then you have the issue, and I know that the jury is still out on last month's Wayne National Forest area earthquake that occurred at 3.0. Folks say it had something to do with the production operations that are around. Not a lot of injection wells around, but some production operations around. Again, haven't heard from DNR or the feds or whomever about the full result of that. And government timing, will be a while to know. But again, it's something to be concerned about. That it's perhaps not always the injection wells. We have plenty of problems with injection wells, but looking at the entire way that we produce and ship and deal with the waste of this issue is we have to look at it in a holistic way, not just what happens
Well, I mean,
a mile underground.
It truly is remarkable to not here, but look in Oklahoma where they've been drilling more wells longer, and the number of earthquakes, Oklahoma didn't really used to have earthquakes, and now they have earthquakes like California.
Which is why the whole volume and pressure conversation is so important.
On the injection well?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And I think that what they have learned in Oklahoma, and I can't speak for my brethren down there, but if you read any of the headlines, they've started to slow down the volume and reduce the pressure, and I think that's helped somewhat.
And an injection well, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, but when I was at Dave Hill's injection well, who I know you know,
too, that's right.
I did, but an injection well, it doesn't look like much. It's some pumps around a hole in the ground. Doesn't look like a hole in the ground, obviously, and a bunch of trucks that are coming and offloading water, and they pump that water down into the hole in the ground, and they're looking for a porous sandstone, I think, usually deposit. Something porous that'll absorb that water. They pump it down. They're allowed to take it up to a certain pressure. They take it up to that pressure, and they wait, and the water goes out into that rock, and then they put some more in, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And the other thing, though, I don't think we've commented on yet is, really since the 80s, 83, I think, it's been the preferred method from the US EPA for wastewater disposal. The challenge will be, and as Trent and his
And
group
not
know,
just fracking fluids. There are other things
Class
that have
1s all the
long
way to
been
Class 5s,
disposed
absolutely.
of by putting an injection well.
From Class 1s,
Right.
the waste that comes from steel, all the way down to salt brine, basically, that you make. And as Trent's group knows this too, at some point, I think the analogy is the bathtub gets full. And so long term,
That sandstone is full of water, essentially.
at some point,
right, yeah.
somewhere. Not today, not tomorrow, but at some point. And so I think that long term, the industry looks at things like fracking with, now you don't get rid of all the water because there'll always be some comes up, but to reduce the volume through maybe using a foam or a gel or gas or something like that. Also using it, there are plenty of companies that are trying to figure out how to clean it and use it for something else. Probably the best example is actually up here. Duck Creek has their Aqua Salina that they have, Aqua Salina?
I don't know the name of it.
I think that's
I know who you're talking about. Right,
Dave
they're
Mansberry's.
making road de-icer
Yeah,
and
for
things
ODOT
like that
and county
from it.
engineers. So they've taken it, they've cleaned it, moved all the solids and things out of it, and use it for de-icer for ODOT and things in northern Ohio.
Because
And-
at the end, when it's done, it's brine.
Sure,
saltwater, yeah.
gotcha. And Trent, is that cool?
Is it cool? It's not. It's not cool. I think as I said with a lot of it, the jury is still out. We had concerns about plans for municipalities to take the straight
Sure. Into
brine
their
water
treatment systems.
into
right,
their
right.
treatment systems.
Which we don't do.
Okay.
That is inappropriate.
Well, I mean, you're talking about desalination, right? I mean, in order to
Essentially.
really treat it, which, I mean, no one has really figured out how to do that
And we don't have a lot of-
economically.
No, they figured out how to do it.
Economically, I threw in economically, Ned.
Well, now you're getting into volumes because, like on the Gulf Coast where they have plenty of salt water, they can do things.
Right.
So if you're here on the recycling side as well as maybe even the injection side, the volumes that are being produced, you're looking at the economics of what you do with that. Now, Dave Mansberry and some of the Duck Creek folks have figured out economically as a positive what to do with it. But until something else changes, the preferred method is still disposal in Class 2.
And can he use all the brine he can get?
Absolutely,
Yet? Can he
yeah.
really? He can sell all the brine he can get?
Yeah.
Is it now I realize also, even if you're talking about regular brine that was never in fracking fluid, that has issues, environmental issues, and I think we've seen some recent studies on freshwater lakes that are not as fresh as they used to be, in part because of that. But is it anybody know, is it any worse than the regular brine that we would normally be using on our roads? I'm not sure we're ever going to get out of using salt in Northeast Ohio, but
I think
Trent thinks we
and I
can.
haven't seen the latest studies from what comes out of those operations, but I think it's extremely difficult to rid the water from all that can come up.
Okay.
So we have the issue with brine, and I'm a lawyer, I'm a lobbyist, I'm a card-carrying environmentalist, so I'm usually a cup half empty kind of guy. But I'll try to be cup half full and hope that someday we get this right. But the issue of waste, period, is a problem, and it starts with the water, but it doesn't end with the water issues. It goes to the drill cuttings, disposing of drill cuttings, especially. Again, I'm a BA degree guy and a JD. The people with the BS degrees are the ones that tell me this, but you get the
Now, I was political science. Is that BS, or is that the different BS you're talking about?
It's a different BS.
Different BS,
I've got
okay.
that too. Yeah.
Okay.
But they tell me that when you're getting into these deep shales, you cannot get away from the radioactive material that is under there, and.
What do you mean, radioactive material?
From just the naturally occurring radioactive material.
So it's already down there.
Uranium
It's down there now?
238 that's down underneath
Okay.
of us. It's been there, and it does a great job staying right
Okay.
there.
It's the same thing about anybody that's got
Granite tops.
granite tops in their houses. You're importing a little bit of radioactivity into your house.
Yeah.
I'll be using that in the near term.
Yeah, it
future,
helps
Ned.
when you're
Thank you very
arguing for
much.
Corian, which, by the way,
And the thicker the granite, the more uranium
Right.
that you're buying, right?
Right.
Okay, awesome.
And they're going into, and because of the the wisdom of our General Assembly, we've decided that we're just going to take those to solid waste landfills without a discussion on really what we can do.
This is a mud sludgy. type
Mud
of
sludgy,
material.
and we're not just talking about a countertop. We're talking about multiple countertops coming up, and more coming to the point where, again, the BS degree folks tell me this, that you create ultimately, if we have the amount coming in from these drill cuttings and the amount of uranium 238 that are present in them, you could create a little hotspot that's. It's not going to be when I'm around, it's not going to be when my daughter's around, but it's going to be around if we don't figure out how to deal with this. And it was a situation where we had the General Assembly make the decision on what we allow into our solid waste landfills, and now the state Ohio EPA has to figure out, okay, how do I actually have somebody with a monitor that can keep track of
And
this?
is there a good alternative proposal yet?
There
There are operators like the Aqua Salina stuff. Well, how do you find a beneficial use for something that essentially go in a landfill? Pennsylvania has figured out they're using some of it for road base. They can spread it over several miles. There are others that are talking about
Does the road glow? You don't have to light it?
at night. It's perfect. You don't have to stripe it or anything.
It may not leach like a landfill does. That's
no,
the
I
only,
mean, it's the same way in which we've experimented with slag as roadbed. So it's also some of the ways where if you've got some land which is mildly radioactive, you cap it, you fill it, and you make certain no one punches a hole in it. It usually turns into a field of some sort. And, that's the American Steel and Wire site in Cleveland. We've had to deal with that. There are ways to treat it, but you have to be smart about it. And also, you really should be totally transparent about what's going on.
So let me ask this, because you can get kind of deep into this, and next thing you know, you're talking about radioactivity and all sorts of other environmental things that you don't want to see happen. Before we started drilling, there was a lot of concern, a lot of fear that all of these things are gonna happen, and we're gonna screw up our aquifers. On a whole, so far, and I'm not, I realize it's still kind of early days, but has shale drilling been more or less successful or environmentally damaging than was initially feared, advertised, whatever? I'm going to let Trent go first.
no, I'm going to let you guys.
Oh,
I'm going to
I was
wait.
gonna
I'm
say-
going to wait my
oh, you get
turn.
the last word. All right.
What happened starting 2008 through 2011, because the fact base was very thin, the conversation was dominated by fear and optimism. So no matter what happened, you're going to say at that point, you can find lots of examples where we're thinking about
Right. On the one hand, we had
horror
it's going to be the biggest thing since the plow for you economically, and
Right.
then we had Gasland in the theater saying, and your faucets are going to blow
Yeah,
up.
and Gasland, we all have to attribute, was probably one of the best pieces of propaganda film since World War II.
Okay.
But it was just a horrible movie. but at the same time, what was interesting about Ohio was Ohio ODNR was determined to learn from Pennsylvania and to try to get out ahead of this. So it turned out that, we had the Kasich administration, which no one expected to be warm and fuzzy when it came to environmental issues, ended up hiring more inspectors than had been hired ever. What the time period was, Trent, but a lot of inspectors came on at that point in time. The ODNR has been it's not just been reactive to screw-ups. We're seeing them with the Rover pipeline nonsense this week. They're on top of it, but being as proactive as you can be to get the regulations right. So I'm actually proud about what the environmental professionals did in Ohio, given the rapidity with which the initial drilling activity hit the state.
And I'll give a little.
Now for the guy who knows something.
I'll give a little, I think, slightly different perspective on this. I think that, at least from my point of view, as of now, you're right. DNR is a much different regulator than they were in 2010 when it comes to oil and gas development. That is for sure. I would not agree that they were gung-ho about getting it right first. I had been in enough meetings that said, we've got it all taken care of. And then a couple years later, they say, we're going to do this gap analysis and see where all the problems are in our regulations. And they found all these problems with gaps in their regulations a couple years later. I don't want to be sort of cynical on this, but I think a lot of what has motivated the Kasich administration in the early days of this was the hope that we could utilize the oil and gas operations to help out our tax base by increasing their severance tax and utilizing it for things that the severance tax wasn't meant to be used for.
But we have some pretty low severance taxes in Ohio compared to
I believe we do.
producing states.
We aren't in.
I've heard.
We disagree.
We could say that it could be modernized, and I know that you have a different definition of what modernization of that
He likes
could be.
taxes about as much as you like carcinogens. So.
And so I think, for both good and bad, that this push to utilize the oil and gas industry to help the ultimately, well, it's failed, but help the tax base has moved them to make those changes, to do those gap analysis, to see, okay, where can we be the strongest? And a lot of things they have done better, but I think a lot of the big issues that they've hit have been reactions to incidents, reactions to earthquakes that have happened, reactions to the dumpings of the brine into the Mahoning River. Eisenbarth well pad fire in 2014, in which there was about 20 explosions, and I don't know how mile or 2 miles of folks were evacuated. It took about a week or so to get those fires extinguished. They used the wrong foam or the right foam or whatever, and it caused downstream impacts from that into the Ohio River. And one of the biggest problems with that was the reason why they did use the foam or the water or whichever one they used was that they didn't have all of the information. Those first responders didn't have all the information until a few days into their fire extinguishing. And that is sort of one of the big gaps that I still don't think has been fixed yet. But it is a community issue. It is a big economic issue, obviously, and it's an industry issue because it shows, from my point of view, that there are gaps, there are holes, and some of these earlier issues have shown there are some bad actors that don't make the industry look good and show that not every operation bursts into flames. Not every not every pipeline causes the problems that pipelines have.
There's some people who are low bidders for a reason.
Yeah, and I think that DNR and the regulatory system we have is getting better. I think they do a very good job in reacting quickly. They do a very good job in standing up when there are bad actors. Again, for both the reasons that it makes everybody look bad when you have those bad actors. So I agree that it's a better situation than what we had in 2010. It's not where we want it to be, but I think we're getting close to being almost where I wanted to be in 2010, which is about that far away from where we need to be.
Okay. Well, and I mean, in the industry, I've seen the industry not be nice to some bad actors too. Like when that guy was dumping the stuff into the Mahoning River in Youngstown.
wrote him off
I
before
think,
anybody else
yeah,
did.
it seemed like some of the
spoke
people
out against
most
him harder
angry
and longer than
were
anybody else
the
did.
drillers. I wanted to touch on two things. That is, these laterals. When I first started looking at these wells, they were going, maybe 3,000 feet, 4,000 feet laterally underground. Now they're going 6 times, 7 times that distance. So that means two things. It means a longer pipe underground, but it also means fewer holes at the surface for every 1,000 feet of pipe underground or every 1,000 MCF of gas that you're going to get,
Well, it also
probably.
means better than fewer holes also means fewer drill pads.
Right.
Because,
Surface disturbance in general.
yeah, I mean, a drill pad is an industrial activity. When you're drilling, it's 24/7. When they're doing the fracs, the pressure is noisy. There are lights on all the time. Some of them, most of them are in fairly rural locations, so the truck traffic brings up a lot of dust.
Okay. And they're also drilling faster. In other words,
yeah,
they're going
they are.
out 7 times longer. They're not taking 7 times longer to drill it.
No, they're actually
Right.
taking less time.
Less time to drill it. So at the end of the day, that means fewer rigs, which in a sense is less economic activity because those rigs spur economic activity. They have to be supplied and they have to hire people. But it also means fewer chances for pollution at the surface.
Yeah, well,
Should we be glad?
All right, the answer is yes. Here's the reason why. When you look at the numbers employed, turn them all into a fraction or percentage of employment in the state, the direct activity in developing the fields is pretty small. For the counties that they're located in, and remember, these are counties that have been systematically disinvested in for 60 to 80 years. They've seen nothing. It's important. My favorite example was I was going down to Belmont County a couple years ago to look at a Dominion gathering plant or location. And the place wasn't on any of our cell phone maps, printed maps, so we got pretty well lost. So we hit a fork in the road and following Yogi Berra, we took it. So we went off to the right. And at this intersection was Appalachia's economic history. Because as soon as we got to the right, the first thing we saw was an abandoned strip mine. And you saw the telltale halves of the scraggly trees at the top, and we got up and looked, and it was pretty ugly. Went down the road another mile, and there was a prison. And that was the economic development strategy for Appalachia about 15 years ago. Well, we said we're going the wrong direction. We turned around, took the other part of the fork, and there was the gathering line and the separation plant. So right in that corner, you saw Appalachia. You didn't see a lot of agriculture. There wasn't a lot of woods work activity going on there. And so the work really was one of, at that point, was putting in the pipelines, a lot of the landscaping that goes around it, road building, construction, and the boon for a lot of people, particularly who aren't in the mines anymore, as long as they could pass a drug test, was truck driving. So the real economic benefit of the resource to the state, and this is what we said in our other work, it's the follow-on activity. The real economic benefit is lower electricity prices because we saw the shift in the generating plants going to natural gas combined cycle plants. The air pollution is 50% less than a coal plant. The prices are a lot less, and these aren't peaking plants, these are base load plants. And we've got about $9 billion worth of investment in those plants underway in Ohio as we speak.
And do we have cheaper energy, both in
Yes.
terms of electricity and natural gas, than
Well,
we would otherwise because of this?
No, here's the important.
Lowest cost natural gas in the industrialized world in the Appalachian Basin.
Okay.
Right, so the Dominion South Hub has the lowest prices. They will go up eventually. The reason why electricity prices have dropped in Northeast Ohio is indirectly related to that. It really is the state of Ohio opening up the electric generating market and making it competitive, and that's what First Energy is trying to stop right now.
right.
First Energy is trying to remonopolize the electric generating business and pre-monopolize the alternative energy business. So
A lot of that competitive electricity is coming from natural gas
It-
plants,
it-
including some in Ohio.
No, that's absolutely correct. So that's the reason why the nukes have very high operating costs relative to these plants. And even if you had a doubling of the natural gas prices, we're still cheap.
Okay.
And we've got 100 years.
More efficient.
Oh, ecologically more efficient. The old gas plants were 33% efficiency rate. These are 66%. They're really amazing little
And
deals.
as the wells evolve, Trent, are they making you less or more comfortable or uncomfortable, glass half full, half empty? You
Well,
take your pick.
I got to go back to the half empty on this one because and I don't want to call it that it's a red herring about all the concerns have been what's going on a mile underground because really the biggest problems are happening on the surface, in the air, and when you're talking about bigger and bigger operations, there's more and more concern at that level. When you're talking about these large pads, no matter how efficient they're running, they do have these 24/7 impacts that happen during the drilling process. That we've talked to folks in Belmont and Monroe County that have told us some really hard stories, and I know some people say it's buyer's remorse that they decided, hey, I'll take the money for the lease, whatever hits me, I'll take it, and they're seeing exactly what it is when it comes to this, from the noise, from the trucks, from the air pollution that comes in, whether it's from the stationary sources and the venting operations to the diesel trucks and diesel equipment in there. That's the big concern. When you have
I've even seen examples. I mean, no one ever said the world was fair or that the oil and gas industry was any fairer. But where Grandpa signed, a lease for vertical drilling a long time ago, and he got free gas for the house, but guess what? Along with those mineral rights went his shale rights, and now someone else is getting them.
It was a one-page lease that Granddaddy signed,
Exactly,
and
yeah.
he put it in the drawer, and we're dealing some of those legacy issues, and Trent hit on some really important things. We've heard anecdotal stories as well too, just like those guys have, where the lights bother me, the noise bothers me, but I tell you what, it saved the family farm, or my brother-in-law's driving that truck that's bothering the neighbor, and I think there's.
Well, here's the interesting example going on in Holmes County, because the eastern edge of Holmes County is close to the sweet spot. And so what's happened is, because of the value of the mineral rights, which seem to be largely intact in Holmes County, the value of farmland is going up very rapidly. So the end result is the Amish families are having difficulty buying farmland for their kids.
Colorado and places. too,
Well,
right?
yeah, we're seeing outmigration of Amish into Kentucky, Maine, Colorado, and some into New York as a result. So with any economic resource, if there's an increase in the asset value, there are going to be repercussions. Those that own the asset are going to win. And those that are, for other reasons, trying to hold on to a lifestyle are going to have difficulty doing it. I mean, that's part of any economic transition.
I'm going to try to start getting to some of the questions.
By the way, I want to do one last piece, because this is the part of the natural gas industry that really bothers me as I've looked at a little bit of the science. We do have a methane problem in Northeast Ohio from old undiscovered wells that aren't capped or not properly capped. And I look at...
These could be decades old or years old or what?
These go back to the 1880s.
Wow, okay.
So if you think of, I lived in Lakewood for 30 years. Lakewood has a problem of improperly capped wells. So there's methane seepage that's taking place. So I was hoping that the legislature would be able to take some of the windfall that comes from this to provide a fund to deal with those issues, because it isn't methane from one place or the other. It's the
Orphan and idle wells.
yeah, it's essentially how can we most efficiently lower the earth warming material that's in the sky.
Any talk or anything in the works
Well,
to
I
try
tell
to
you what,
create a fund?
these two groups have gotten together to talk about it, and he'll know more about this than I, but there is a fund already in the statute that oil and gas producers pay that is specifically held for orphan and idle wells. Okay. What we are both advocating for, among others, is a robust use of those funds to go out and plug.
You and who?
And OEC.
OEC.
Working with the legislature to try
Get
to
out.
find a way to
Arm
do
in
it.
arm.
There are times
Arm in
when we
arm.
do, because ultimately we have different goals, but sometimes we have the same means in order to get there. And one thing is, from our point of view, these orphan wells that at least are 80 years worth, from the 1880s to the 1960s when we had the oil and gas law put in place, and then some orphaned and abandoned wells since then. These are pathways to pollution. They're safety hazards, unbelievable safety hazards. Mainly for the most part, the people don't know that they're around. They don't know that they're in their basement. They don't know that they're in their backyards or in their farm fields.
What do you care?
Because we, like them, believe that it is in our best interest to prevent a serious pollution issue and a migration issue, anything like that.
Besides, things that go boom, they get blamed for.
Exactly.
Okay, yeah.
Listen,
Exactly.
it's always going to be us, whether it is or
So
not.
that's the hope, is we
wanna-
can take care of those orphan wells.
I'm going to kind of let some of these questions guide the topics a little bit, because actually I think we probably have enough questions to take us through to 8:30 if we wanted to. Pipelines. We still need them or drillers still need them if they're going to get the prices that they want for their gas.
They're a lot better than choo-choo cars.
And they are better than trains or trucks from a traffic and probably a safety standpoint. But we've got the Rover line creating some controversies with some spills and not paying for its historical damage in, I think, year one. And then we've got this Nexus line, which, I try to be objective, but I got to tell you, I look at that and I can't see any reason why this thing wouldn't go south of Stark, Summit, and Medina. But whatever, people are probably more adversarial opposition, thank you, than they expected, especially in Medina, which is not exactly a bastion of hippies.
No, or my own hometown in the city of Greene in Summit County. And what the Nexus folks would tell you is that because we've got the 13 interconnects to Dominion and Columbia system, if we moved 10, 15, 20 miles south along that route, there's actually more land disturbance to drill that, to get that lateral than to those interconnects, either at the industrial parks or the facilities. So if I move it 5, 10, 15 miles north, it's actually less because I don't have to run those laterals. I can do a direct interconnect.
Okay, but you end up with this, and this is a big pipeline. This is 36 to 42 inches in diameter. So I mean,
It's a big pipeline.
even I would probably be able to crawl through this thing.
It's a 60-inch hole for that pipeline equipment.
Right, exactly, and hopefully there's never an issue with it. But if there was, it could be disastrous. So, you're in Greene. It's going to go right underneath the Imbecilla Reservoir and across Caston, and it could blow up Giuseppe's Pizza. I mean, good God.
Well, then we have a problem.
Is that going to get built, and does the industry need it? Because it also seems to go on the same route as the Rover pipeline and to the same place as the Rover pipeline.
So, a couple of things. Obviously, I would agree that Rover has had beyond a few tough weeks with their 11 issues. But I will also tell you that the process has worked. They are not complying with federal regulation. They are not up to snuff.
Who is, Rover?
Rover.
Okay.
And FERC shut them down.
Okay.
And then they also, because of their 11 issues.
And you're not going to defend them?
No.
Okay.
How? Can't,
Okay.
can't, won't, can't, shouldn't, aren't.
Okay.
But I will tell you.
But you need them.
Have to have them.
Yeah.
But I will tell you that hopefully they stand up and start to pay attention, because they are not getting any more boring permits from the FERC until they get their act together. And also because
and
of
that's
their
not usual for FERC to do that, right? I mean, that's
that they stood up and stopped the
FERC
entire
is-
pipeline.
Yeah, they if anything, have a reputation as trying to get pipelines moving, not
So the
stopped.
fact that they said you're done,
Mm-hmm.
get your act together, but also the EPA fining them $500,000, and then there's also the issue. And we've heard both sides, both from the state the historical preservation folks as well as Nexus saying, we've already paid you 2.3. That's what we agreed on. They said, well, no, you owe us 1.5 more. So they're going to go to federal mediator on that. But I would absolutely tell you that FERC did the right thing, shut them down. And they said a couple of things. One, you need a third-party inspector to make sure that you're complying. You also need more, I think the operators or something along those lines to make sure that you're slowing down. And three, slow down. Slow down.
Because it's infrastructure we're going to be living with for decades.
Yeah.
Many
And their
decades,
goal
maybe.
is to get it in place by July 1st so they can have the operations and just cut through Ohio and to get from east to through
Southeast to
Ohio to Michigan and into Canada. And, treating, from my point of view, treating Ohio as just an alleyway in which you have, it's not 11, it's now up to 20 incidents that have occurred where you have these what they call inadvertent returns, which sounds whatever it sounds like, but it's
like an alternative flat.
exactly it's in some cases a couple million gallons of this sludge that unfortunately gets into wetlands in northern Ohio that are there to protect the lake. The very few natural wetlands that we have, the 2 million gallon
This from
one
a pipeline?
from the
Now,
pipeline,
Why?
from the Rover
Why is
pipeline.
sludge in a pipeline?
Well, it's the bentonite
Bentonite clay.
clay they used to lubricate the drill bit as it goes under the road, the whatever, the remosaur.
Okay.
So that's what seeped up through the fissures in the rock, basically, to the surface.
Okay.
Nobody went like this and dumped it. Nothing broke. It came, as they're drilling, it seeped up, and that's
And
into
this
the
is
wetland.
an almost presumed thing that happens throughout these operations.
It's part of their permit.
It should,
Okay.
it should have been expected.
And it's
Well, and again, this thing's not a mile underground. It's only, a couple feet underground, right? Yeah, okay.
when you have that big of a big of an operation and you have a 6-page, no, actually with cover pages, it was a 4-page contingency plan for these inadvertent returns, which hopefully now Ohio EPA gets to stand up, although Rover has said and that they don't believe that Ohio has the authority over them. Hopefully we will be standing behind Ohio EPA to make sure that they do continue to have their authority, especially when we have new FERC folks going up for nomination in the next couple of weeks. Hopefully that this particular issue is part
Do they have
of
a quorum now?
once they get those nominations
Down to,
through.
of the 5, they're down to, I think, 2.
So they can't make a decision to. on
Their
anything?
staff can do certain things, move the process along, but an actual certificate has to.
But they cannot approve that Nexus line until they get
They
some,
cannot have the
some more
certificate until
members.
there's 3 members, at least 3 of the 5.
Now, one of the things I think is helpful to keep in mind when we're talking about pipelines and badly executed construction projects that take shortcuts are indefensible. I'm not going to leave that there. But we also have to remember what happened to a town in Quebec when Canada, where an oil train brakes
Right,
weren't
right.
properly set, rolled down, and
3
wiped
years
it.
ago, I think. or
Yeah,
2
wiped
years
out the
ago.
town.
Yeah, right.
We saw in Alabama.
Wipe out Quebec.
No, the town.
Oh, okay.
There's more than one town in Quebec. We also saw an incident in Alabama where the same thing happened. We had another one, I think, was in Illinois. There have been 4 or 5 incidents, or probably more, but 4 or 5 that I remember graphically, of a catastrophic explosion by taking highly volatile gasoline, because the stuff coming out of North Dakota has lots of volatile chemicals in it, and they explode. And so pipelines, from an operating perspective, are a much safer way to move the fluid.
Okay.
Nothing scares me more than that train that we see at 130th Street will frequently be parked right along the wall along downtown Cleveland, from City Hall all the way up. And if something happened there, that would be a true catastrophe. So I think it's in the best interest of all of us to get pipelines that work safely and are well monitored, and cutting corners on things won't help us. Doesn't help the industry either.
When your decision is the best of whatever bad idea, that's a hard bargain to make, though. If you're, I don't want it to explode on the surface, but who knows what happens underground? And I'm gonna, you know.
Well,
No,
the thing
it's
is
well
the
less.
BP
Trent, it's
still
literally
out.
almost empty.
It's
Even the biggest operator can have a horrible mishap if they start not paying attention and
here's the thing
And cutting corners.
and cutting corners, right?
guys have to be perfect every day.
Right.
Trent is able to say, whoa, there was this and there was that, and all he has to be is right once. I have to be right every day.
Right. That's why you get the big bucks.
Really? No, in all seriousness. Look at this sharp dress guy. No, in all seriousness, we have to be right every day, all day, every time.
Sure.
He has to be right once.
And the public policy point here is that Ohio has no choice. Ohio is an industrial state. We're an intensive industry-using state. We are the fourth largest electricity user in the United States, the fifth largest producer. If we want to produce cars, if there's an injection plastic industry that could support it, if we're going to melt steel, all that takes large amounts of energy.
So that actually goes to another question. In 10 years, what would we see in our economy that is going on and that related to or traceable to our shale gas development?
And I just want to bring up what I mentioned before about the promise that nuclear power had for us, and that it was going to be so cheap that we're not even going to mean it, and it's going to be so clean, and you're going to love it. It's going to be tremendous. Sounds like what we're hearing on the news today. Things are tremendous. It's wonderful. So I just leave that as the
Was that a
preface.
political undertone there?
It was no. It's just it's a. So go ahead and.
So, in it.
What's that? Okay, I'm on my third question.
I would tell you that in a perfect world moving forward, we have a unregulated market where the marketplace can compete, and we have a diversity in electric generation. We've got wind, we've got solar, we've got bio, we've got nuclear, we've got coal, we got it all.
Okay.
That's good for the economy. That's good for the environment. That's good for diversity and energy security. If there's a natural disaster, a terrorist attack, whatever it may be. So natural gas is absolutely, going to be a big part of that. But it's also an all the above approach and also an all the below approach.
But I mean, I think the question from the audience, I think what they want to know is, are we going to see a whole new plastics industry in 10 years, or are we going to see a bunch of drilling jobs, or what?
In Belmont County, if you get an ethane cracker, absolutely. You'll be producing more plastic pellets, essentially, that you can melt into anything in Belmont County when that cracker comes. So yes, you will see that in the Appalachian Basin.
It's the combination of Belmont County with the Shell plant in Beaver. So what the savings takes place is the plastics industry, which really starts about York, Pennsylvania, and goes up through Milwaukee, will have a price advantage over that to the south if just by losing the haul of the plastic pellets from the Gulf Coast up here. That spot market could be very important. The PPT cracker, that's the one in Belmont. They are going forward with their engineering studies. They're being very cautious. And so no one really knows where that one's going to end up.
Supposed to hear fourth quarter, maybe? That's the last we heard.
That's the last we heard. I mean, there were some rumors started kicking around about 3 weeks ago, and then they died down again. So what happens is by having those two crackers work in this region, the employment effect ends up in our manufacturing base rather than directly in the energy industry itself.
Okay. If somebody's asked if we could comment on the 3.0 magnitude earthquake that occurred in the Wayne National Forest and the temporary halting of fracking there as a result.
I think Trent mentioned it a few minutes ago. I agree with him that the jury's still out. We recognize that there were officially that the event did happen, and I think DNR stopped everybody within a mile radius, and there were 2 or 3 producers down there. We just haven't heard.
Okay, and there's some lawsuits out of that as well, right, against BLM and.
Well, the
Not on the
lawsuits come from
seismic issue.
Come from the
Okay.
leasing issue, which is also being done at the same time as the earthquakes that are happening. They're looking to open up for lease the Marietta unit, 40,000 acres of the Marietta unit of the Wayne National Forest. So it's at the very least an unfortunate coincidence that those two things are occurring, and it is the only national forest that we have in Ohio belonging to the people.
And different than a national park, though, different than a nature preserve. By sort of tradition and by law, I mean, forests are used for recreation, but also for timber, for coal, for aggregates, for pipeline right-of-way, for utility right-of-way. And notwithstanding that, there are also property owners that are in, around, and beside the Wayne who are not able to use their minerals because it's not like the Grand Canyon where it's one big parcel. It's pieces and parcels that have been put together for 50 years.
It's actually more like the Adirondacks, but on a smaller scale.
Much smaller scale.
And is the industry also, is it arguing to drill in other parks as well? Or okay, parks in addition to national forest?
No, we haven't talked about that at all.
Okay.
I know there are some landowner groups that have advocated that because they maybe I think it's called NARRO, National Association of Royalty Owners. They have got landowners that are members both in the Wayne and maybe other state parks that are next to that can have access to because of either the state choosing not to lease or the federal government up until recently choosing not to lease. Some of that has changed a little bit, particularly down in Monroe County. And I think the biggest benefit of that will be the Switzerland Local School District, which is by far, I think, geographically the largest school district in Ohio, and I would argue probably one of the poorest because it's all the Wayne and there's very little taxes.
It's actually one of the least achieving as well.
And so when they start to get money from not only those landowners, but also the federal government because of payment in lieu of taxes, Switzerland Local School Districts, and I've been there, I've toured the buildings, they have outhouses for restrooms. They can finally get a chance to do some things that other school districts, including the one that I went to in Stowe, had an opportunity to do.
Okay. I have a question. This might be a little tongue-in-cheek, but their handwriting is so nice, I'm going to go with it. Compare the danger of one countertop to one well in radioactive terms. I'm assuming they're talking about the sludge or stuff brought up from the well. I'm going to take a stab that the stuff from the well is worse, but you're not going to cook on it.
Or eat off of it.
But it's going to get buried in landfills with more and more countertops on top of it, creating those hot spots where, and we've had, Northeast Ohio knows the problems we have with landfills and landfill fires and landfill leachate problems. Just imagine that with uranium-238 at levels that we cannot imagine at the moment, and Ohio EPA is dealing with that issue now in the regulatory structure in the Department of Health, and
right now, I think the
It's a
limit is 5 picocuries. 5?
correct. Yes.
To get into a landfill, your truck can't set off the sensor if there's more than 5 picocuries, which is the unit of measurement for radioactivity. Less than that, you're in. More than that, you got to go to a specialized facility.
Okay. Someone asked if we could discuss the favorable Ohio tax impact that this has had. What has it meant to state coffers in terms of not just severance tax, but sales tax, and a lot of trucks were sold?
The biggest one is the ad valorem tax, which is the property tax that oil and gas producers pay into county governments. It all stays local. None of it gets lost in Columbus.
Okay.
I think in the last 10 years, a little over 50.
Meaning a property tax I pay on the good stuff that's underneath?
So my oil and gas producers, by not only producing it, which is the severance tax, but it's also based on the minerals that are still in the ground through a formula, pay into local governments, primarily schools, between 60 and 70%. That's probably the big one. The second one from us is probably the RUMA agreements, which is the road usage maintenance agreements. By our permit conditions, we have to repair the roads either ahead of time or after the fact.
And this
That's
is money that you spend into a local community where you're actually
primarily in townships, but
have
also
traffic on the roads.
Primarily on townships, but also county roads, where if it's not wide enough for 2 trucks to pass, we have to do a total depth reclamation and make sure, at our own expense, to make sure that 2 trucks can pass with width, and it's also the depth to make sure they can handle the truckload.
Okay.
So, in addition to severance, which funds the regulatory program, ad valorem and RUMAs are probably the two big ones.
Well, no, there's a third, and that's straight sales tax.
tax.
So we
And bed tax.
with a bed tax. So we saw when we were doing the shale monitor, we saw very large bumps in sales tax, not in the sweet spot itself, but in kind of the mid-sized towns and cities around it. So they had a mall, they had, some hotels. But where you can physically see the impact that this activity's had is in Canton, where now it's, Main Street in Canton, last time I checked, was pretty much full on rents. The retail would come back a bit.
In Cambridge, too, actually.
Cambridge, there's been a huge increase.
Absolutely.
The other place that's gotten a benefit from all this is Columbus. But that's because the activity is further to the south than from here. We thought it was going to be more further north.
And to the west, too.
Columbus benefiting from state tax dollars going in, or you mean from the activity nearby?
It's activity nearby. It's people flying into the airport, staying overnight. We're seeing some professional service activity. I'm looking at Don, I think some of the legal business we thought was up here ended up going down there. So the professional services contracts are taking place down in the Columbus area. And that has everything to do with the fact that, we thought that Columbiana County and North was going to have enough to justify development in state south. That doesn't say that's not going to happen in 10 or 15 years, but the gas is much drier up here.
I have a question about Noble County. Do we know where Noble County is? I know where Noble County is. It's near Muskingum County. It's not far from Zanesville.
Oil well discovery in the entire United States.
Was
Noble County, the Thorough McKee well.
first
in
oil
1814.
well?
Yep, oil was first discovered. They weren't looking for it, but they discovered it.
They were before Titusville?
Before?
Titusville
Don't
put it
mention
into.
that to the Titusville people.
They put it.
Don't mention that to the Titusville.
The Titusville people put it into production first, but we
Okay.
were the first discovery of oil, 1814. Thorough
Okay.
McKee.
Well, let's get to the audience question. The audience says Noble County has suffered greatly, especially due to heavy equipment damaging the infrastructure. Has had next to zero jobs were gained in this poor county, and the drilling companies don't plan on repairing infrastructure. How is this poor county to pay for the mess left by fracking? Talk about Wolf Lake.
Don't know about Wolf Lake, but I can tell you we were just with the Noble County Commissioners, and they're happy about all the tax that's coming in. We have paved more roads in Noble County through our permit than the Noble County engineer was able to do. Most of these county engineers have about a $500,000 budget. We're paving somewhere between $50+ million a year in roads. So I think we're taking care of not only roads, but bridges, culverts, slips, guardrails, and striping, dust and ice control as well on the maintenance side. So the commissioners are happy. Caldwell is buzzing. I'm hearing nothing but good things out of Caldwell.
I have a comment. I'm not sure I can read all of this, but I think I can get the gist of the question. Please comment on radioactive elements like radium, carcinogenic, thank you, carcinogenic actually, hydrocarbons like benzene. Basically, what's all this crap in the drilling fluid, and is it going to get any better, or is it just going to stay this way, and how bad is it?
Only 30 to 50% of that fluid is actually recovered.
Okay,
Correct.
so it stays underground.
Let's hear the environmental experts.
If you
Okay.
would have read the question the way I posed it, I think they would understand more completely.
Okay,
This isn't a joke either.
Why don't you let her ask the
Can we just have her ask it?
sure.
Just let her ask the question. I think that's easiest.
He knows.
Pipelines leak, by the way.
Yes. and
Please
there's a lot of
comment
others.
on radioactive elements like radium and carcinogenic hydrocarbons like benzene that fracking wastewater contains, as well as the high methane concentration found in drinking water wells near fracking sites, and the fact that only 30 to 50% of fracking fluid is actually ever recovered for safe disposal.
Environmental though.
Okay, I will take those.
I'm a hippie.
Yeah, that was really.
I apologize.
Yeah, and the talk of using those fluids in any way that's beneficial, I'm dubious to that. Again, there are better ways to do it than injecting back into the ground. There are better ways than what we've seen that's both allowable, or was allowable, and even when it's not allowable, to put that through wastewater treatment plants. Wastewater treatment plants aren't ready.
The stuff that's brought up and then put down into a regulated injection well. She's asking about the
stuff that's left
that
down there.
stays down there in the actual fracking well.
You know, the issue when we're talking about that, the problem is that we may never know.
Right, because aquifers go everywhere.
Yeah, we may never know. We may never know where and when, and causation, as with anything, is one of the most difficult things when it comes to.
This is why we all have bottles of water to drink. This lady is very, very correct in one of the very strong things when you go underneath the ground and disturb it. You mentioned here on the panel on the West Coast, where they were in league with the Appalachian Regional Commission in the 70s. They came up with all of this knowledge. University level college information, where when we've disturbed the ground, such as where the coal producers did, the Appalachian Regional Commission, when they built all the highways, the interstate system, which was one of my projects in the 70s, is that those people have on the shelf for our technological study how to take care of these problems we're discussing tonight, so we can take away all these bottles of water and drink fresh water. It's just one of the problems. And what we're really talking about here are jobs and transportation and coal and other things. We're not talking about safety and health. And I think this lady is
I agree. And there has to be a balance.
what part?
Yeah, there's absolutely a balance.
There's no balance. There is no
So I think it's really
water,
important to
it's
make
not
sure-
for our
Let me
children.
finish.
Well, you said your comment. Hang on one second.
No,
you
So it's
don't.
very
You
important.
talked all night.
Yeah.
You talked
Because
all
I'm on
night.
camera.
Can you please?
I think it's very important that there is a
You're holding
balance.
a comment.
Take
This
turns.
thing starts where the state of Ohio does not have the safety issues in place, so that when these fracking people
I
go,
disagree with you wholeheartedly.
well, you can disagree, but I'm saying this right now because I can prove these things by the stats already in existence.
That's kind of,
When these fracking people go into a site,
who are the fracking?
whoever digs a hole in the ground and uses what we've been discussing this evening, they are the fracking
So
people.
I didn't know if you're talking about the drillers or the actual hydraulic
I don't want to
fracturing
argue
crew.
with this.
I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying. Just, I want you to be clear. So I
That's
understand.
it, not enough people
Finish.
working on these projects. We want to hear them, that's why
I'm
we
trying
came
to be clear because we have on-the-shelf technology that substantiates these things that I believe are most important to our health.
Please.
We drive around here in dirty air and dirty highways and dirty water. This can be fixed, but the way it starts is that the states, who are an element of the federal government, they have to make sure when these people come on site that they have proven that their technology is safe, it's clean, and it's healthy for the citizenry, not for them. The coal companies have gone to jail for this.
Yeah.
The governor of the state of West Virginia, he went to jail for the same thing. Now, when you start talking about Pennsylvania, those people have been doing this for more than 100 years.
As have we.
They still have, yeah, but they're doing it very well.
As are we.
They have fires all over the state that have been burning for 100 years underground because we went underground and in a very unhealthy way we backed out. The companies went bankrupt, nobody fixed the problem. So the governor of that state right now is very upset because the citizens are having to foot the bill.
Well, in Ohio, we address that differently. Trent and I talked about it a few minutes ago, the Orphan and Ida Well Fund, so that if a company does go bankrupt.
I'm going to stop you because you're a driller, he's
Yeah.
a concerned citizen, and he's an environmental expert. Trent, in Ohio, what have we seen in terms of groundwater and the effect of fracking so far?
The groundwater issue is one where, it's always been this discussion that, and whether it's from way far one end, way far the other, that it's about the things that are happening a mile underneath. The real problems that have occurred through the shoddy well operations, from drilling those initial vertical wells through these aquifers, through the casing, yes. And we've seen that in Ohio. We've seen it in Ohio before these large operations, and that's going to continue to be a concern because of it happens because of a number of reasons, but a lot of the reasons are you put in shoddy work and you go as quickly as possible. We've seen that happen. Is it something that happens in every single well? I'm not going to say that, but I'm saying it happens with regularity. That's problematic. And I think no matter I think DNR, as I said, DNR looks better than it was 10 years ago, but it doesn't matter the amount of folks that you have within those agencies. If you have folks do shoddy work and you don't have something there in terms of resources for when there are problems down the road, when all of us have made our money and lost our money and have gone somewhere else, when there are these legacy issues. I brought up before this hindsight moment that we have, that we didn't have with coal. We didn't have that. You're 100% right. We've got, every time we go underground, it seems that we have 30-year fires underneath, whether it's coal operations underground that are having this, whether it's landfills. We need to have the mechanisms in place to make sure that there is funding to fix those problems that are going to happen in the future when it's beyond our control of the folks that are here. That's the issue that I bring up with the uranium-238. We don't know that it's going to be a problem until it is a problem, and when that is going to happen. With water, drinking water issues, there's drinking water issues that go well beyond oil and gas around here. And that is just one big problem that the state of Ohio has, period, is safe, accessible drinking water for everybody. And every single industrial
lack
operation.
Of regulations for well water drills. There are a lot of
And when people are allowed to come in and just drill wells for water wherever, we've dealt with those problems with those hand dug wells. But also, it's just throughout the entire state there are these drinking water issues, and that's the number one thing that I know when I talk to my members and the groups that are members of OEC. That is the number one issue that they have is drinking water, and it is my only hope is that we can have that discussion, and it's going to involve the oil and gas industry. It's going to involve the coal industry. It's going to involve steel. It's going to involve all those that use the water, as well as those that have operations that can potentially contaminate those. And that's a discussion we need to have, and that comes with resources. And the problem is the state just does not have any resources, and it goes back to this question of why that the governor wants a severance tax increase, not to go to the things that I just talked about, but to go to reduce the income tax. And that is what gets us into the trouble that we have. That money, and I believe it needs to be increased. It needs to be increased from coal side and the aggregates industry as well, that impact our water and that have impacts that are going to be in the future. And that's our hope, that we have those legacy funds, because those things are going to come up. They're going to happen now, but they're definitely going to happen in the future.
And I agree with Trent on that. It's most important to make sure that the oil and gas money stays in the oil and gas fund and doesn't go to the general fund, because that's when it disappears.
What are we doing? I mean, West Virginia's coal jobs are largely gone. Their water problems are still there.
All right, well, let's back up just a little bit on this. The first thing is there are a series of different water issues, all of which are important. Dealing with the natural gas drilling industry, we've got two very distinct issues. We've got a very serious issue of old and abandoned wells. That's causing drinking water problems, that's causing methane leakage, and being able to replenish the fund and keep the fund going to deal with those old, shallow, vertical wells is really important, particularly for the environmental issues.
But I think the concern is we're not creating new old wells. We are creating new fracking wells. And these people want to know, should we continue to do that?
All right, so let me get to Part B.
Okay.
Part B is if you look at the EPA study about the impact of fracking on drinking water, Trent's absolutely right. The study was very clear that where you've got the real problem is during the vertical portion of the drilling, if the well isn't drilled well, and if it's particularly if it isn't cemented well, the casing issue, and it can go into the drinking water. So I'm sitting here and saying, is you have sensors can deal with this, and it really is a matter of making certain that you sensor the well properly, so that what?
Are they doing that now?
I don't know. It's just. I'm in the public policy business. I try to find solutions, but they have to censor the well to make certain that there isn't leakage. When it comes to the very long...
Pressure test, yeah, we do
Right,
that.
pressure test. So, and then when it comes to the very long horizontal frac, which is 2 miles to 4 miles long, EPA found no impact on drinking water because it's so far below the aquifer. And this is a very emotional subject, but you got to keep the science straight in here. And I agree with Trent completely. The one thing we absolutely know about any heavily engineering that involves infrastructure is that something's going to go wrong. We just don't know what it's going to be. And so you need contingencies. So that's my A, B, and C.
Well, I think that's why it's called the Ohio Revised Code. If something's not right, you get in there and you fix it and you address it with the input for these guys and us and everybody else. And probably the best example of that, and you've alluded to it a few times, is the hindsight part, Senate Bill 315. Or 165.
165.
165. That sort of preempted a bunch of our drilling, where the state, industry, and others knew, okay, this is coming. What do we do to get out ahead of it? And that was the casing standard, and that's some of the other things. But I fully agree. That's why it's the revised code. If it's not right, get it right from the state side. Absolutely.
What you gentlemen have done tonight is sugarcoat something
On that, ladies and
and
gentlemen,
everybody knows
thank you very
is
much.
disastrous to the world and humanity.
Thank you very much for having us. I appreciate it.
it. And you know it, and you can smile all you want because you have grandchildren that might not make it, okay? I've spoken.
Thank you.